Hello, health seekers.
Hello,
You are,
I'm Dr. D,
and I'm Andy.
and today we're going to talk about sugar. Not
Not that
bad.
sugar. Sugar is a hot topic, or at least it was for us when we recently raised the question. So, what came out of that whole hot topic?
Oh my, I posted on Facebook question, is sugar good, is sugar bad? And I had like 20 or 30 people chiming in. It was incredible, and I would like to acknowledge every single one of you who have participated because it actually gave us a topic for this particular podcast. 3/4 of people said it's awful, don't eat it, don't touch that stuff, and 1/4 said it's fine. So how many teaspoons of sugar we eat? I looked it up, and on the average, the North America, actually USA, is on the top of the added sugar consumption. So we eat on the average 36 teaspoons of sugar in a day. It's
And
added.
that's refined sugar.
Yeah, that's about 3/4 of a cup. We do use sugar. We have to acknowledge both of us do use sugar, but not even close to a 1/4 cup a day of added sugar. So somebody is eating 1.5 of the cup a day, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's massive.
Somebody's eating what we are not eating.
Yeah, so if practically everybody knows that sugar is bad, but we still somehow eat it, why do we eat it? For sure there are some benefits to it. It's yummy, it tastes good, it helps with baking, makes baking goods really good. All the parties are on sugar, whether you add sugar to alcohol, whether you add sugar to cakes or cookies. And don't we love to go out for coffee and cookies when we want to meet friends? Of course we do. And in baking, you can't make a bread without sugar. Yeast loves sugar. So in order to raise a bread, you need sugar. So today we are going to talk about 4 points that people raised on Facebook. Sugar is addictive. It causes obesity. It causes inflammation, and it's toxic. So I went online and I tried to research, is it really, and what's going on if we eat versus we don't eat?
So, let's dive right into addiction.
Yeah.
How addictive is sugar?
How addictive sugar?
Supposedly, it invokes the same pleasure centers as cocaine in your brain. But what does that really mean?
Well, a few years back, there was one article online was saying, oh wow, the sugar stimulates the brain in the same way as cocaine and heroin, and we know that cocaine and heroin is one of the two most addictive substances. So I looked it up. What does this mean? Does this mean that if you just use it once, the heroin or cocaine, are you going to be an addict? Is it going to be a social problem for you? It turns out that people who use it once, 80% don't even get addicted to it. Only 20% do. And it's only when you start using it, when you're introduced to the substance, when your brain is not fully developed, which means below 20 years old. When you are introduced to cocaine or heroin, when you are over 18 years old or 20 years old, your chances of becoming an addict after first time of use is only 4%. So when you compare these numbers to really saying it's very addictive, don't think that addiction means the minute you use it, you're going to get addicted and you're doomed. It's not like that. So the second thing, what I have discovered when I looked at the addictions is, do you really need to be going through medical procedures in order to become a non-addicted person again? And it turns out 75% of all people who became addicted to drugs, 75% drop stuff on their own.
In other words, for the majority of people that try addictive substances or substances that are generally deemed addictive, it's self-limiting.
Yes, it is self-limiting. You'll be surprised, but studies say that even cocaine or heroin is self-limiting, which means that heroin addict use only, cocaine is 4 years, and marijuana is 6 years. Alcohol is 15 years, and statistically speaking. So for one person it will be 2 years, the other person will be 6 years, but on the average, for example, cocaine, you're out within 4 years. So the question is, do we really get addicted to sugar, or we just use it because? it's available.
And I think what is an important factor to consider is, are you addicted to sugar or are you addicted to the products out of sugar? Try, instead of eating chocolate, ice cream, cake, cookies, or whatever is made out of a high sugar content, or sodas, try just ingesting pure granular sugar.
Yeah, it's really doesn't taste that good.
No.
After the research, I came to a conclusion that addiction to sugar is a very, very small problem. It's most of us are not really addicted to sugar. We are just opportunistic. We like it and it's cheap. It's available. Now, but the reason why we go after sugar is because we eat out, and a lot of foods and packaged foods that are ready made that we don't have to cook, wash dishes after, is made of sugar too. So we are more opportunistic than addicted, and that's the reason why we go for it. But most people who I asked, why is it that you don't cook? Why does you eat out? So you eat junk. Why do you not cook? I don't have time. But I don't think we don't have time. Statistically, an average American spends about 4 hours in front of TV every day. So that's no time? I don't think so. Somehow we just don't like cooking, and we drive the demand for sugar and junk food, and then we blame the companies that they flood us with junk. Well, don't buy it. If you don't want to be flooded with junk, don't buy it.
Here's a way to look at it. A lot of people say that we are victim of what is in a grocery store, but maybe the grocery store is a victim of what people demand.
Yeah, if you buy, they will supply. I also wanted to go back to addictions because from the research that I have learned is that addictions is not really a disease, it's a maladaptive choice to not being able to cope with stress. It might be a hard choice, but addiction is a choice.
As a disclosure, we use sugar, but it on a typical day is probably limited to about 4 cubes of sugar a day, and that's 2 cups of coffee with 2 cubes of sugar each. And that's sort of our average limit, and that may be a little higher here and there, but on a regular day, that's what
Occasionally we have a chocolate. I might eat a speck of chocolate or 2. I don't even eat jam. You do, right? You would take a tablespoon of a jam in a day?
In my yogurt,
yeah. So people know that we do use sugar, but in very limited amounts.
What about obesity? When you're looking at sugar, it's 4 calories per gram, same as protein. Alcohol is 6 calories per gram, and fat is 9 calories per gram. So what does this all mean?
That means that from the caloric point of view, sugar and proteins are the lowest on how much energy you would produce out of them. Alcohol is higher and fat is even the highest. But that doesn't mean anything because we know people who are on high fat diet actually lose weight. So let's talk about glycemic index for a moment. The glycemic index is the number assigned to a product in relationship to how high the sugar in the blood goes up for a specific amount ingested. So let's say if you eat glucose, it will go 100. Sucrose, which is table sugar, it will be 92. A bagel will be 103. Millet will be 101. And the rice will be 128. But what does this mean? It actually means nothing. It only means that if you eat 50 grams of rice, it's worse than eating 50 grams of glucose. But the truth is nobody eats the same amount of sugar and rice in a bowl. You eat 2 cubes of sugar you put 2 cubes of sugar in coffee and tea, but you don't eat 2 cubes of rice in your dinner, right? So this glycemic load, which also takes into consideration how much you eat, is much more important. So I looked at the study that was checking whether people will be losing weight when nearly half of their calories will be made of table sugar. I don't know how awful that diet was. I would not want to eat bowls of sugar, but that's what they make people do. And within the 6 weeks, it turned out that both groups, the one that was eating tons of sugar and the ones that was not eating so much sugar. They both lost weight, cholesterol parameters were better, etc. So it is not that sugar, it's sugar together with a combination with excess calories that is a problem. Was this a good way to lose weight? No, because sugar by itself doesn't have any nutrients and it's just completely useless.
It's just
Food.
pure energy.
Yeah, it's just pure energy. But this was just to demonstrate that even with pure sucrose, if you're on low calories, you can lose weight. So let's not blame sugar for obesity. There is another factor going on that we might not pay attention to. What about us? Do we eat starches, grains, any form of carbohydrates besides sugar? Do we?
Not very much. Regular small amount of fruit for me. And some yogurt, which would be lactose,
yeah.
as well as with the spoon of preserved berries in the form of a jam or marmalade, whatever you want to call
But
it.
that's simple sugar.
Yeah.
We don't use grains, we don't use tubers, we don't use beans, we don't use any other carbohydrate sources. So for us also, are we on a low calorie diet at all?
No.
No, we don't count any calories. So calories do not matter for us, and we eat sugar in moderation, but we don't eat starch.
So what about inflammation? A lot of people concluded that sugar is a product that
Inflammatory, yeah.
causes inflammation.
Yeah.
What does that all mean? What does it mean in regards to insulin resistance, CVD, etc.?
Yeah, so there was this big topic. Everybody talks that sugar is inflammatory. So what does this mean? What do you mean when you say sugar causes inflammation? So there were 4 points that people came up with: the insulin resistance that causes diabetes, the rheumatoid arthritis, cardiovascular diseases, and cancer. So I just looked briefly at some of the studies that talk about the effect of sugar on inflammation. So this is what I found. There were 2 studies that I want to quote for you, so it gives you the sugar in the perspective. So one was done on healthy individuals, younger people. They divided them into 2 groups. One was on high fructose, one was on high glucose. And it lasted about 1 month. They tested the groups, they swapped them, and it turns out that there's absolutely no difference whatsoever in physiological parameters, whether it's insulin reaction, the HOMA, the morning glucose, cholesterol, or anything else. So this is the healthy individual's short-term basis. So on the short-term basis, even high amount of sugar doesn't seem to be producing a long-term problem. However, there was another study that I want to point out that they have done graduated amount of sugar. It means below 10%, 10% to 25%, and over 25%. How does this affect on cardiovascular mortality? This was a very long-term study. There was a 15 years. They were tracking people with specific eating habits and how many of them died due to stroke, heart attacks, etc. And it turns out that there is a big difference between people who are using it only 10% versus people who are using over 25% of calories in a daily basis. It looks like all the studies do point out that sugar is a problem after specific amount has been ingested. So in small amounts, 1 teaspoon, 2 teaspoons makes no difference. But when you start using it regularly in a large amount, that becomes a problem. So when is the problem? There are actually 2 guidelines, 2 different ones. One is the dietary guidelines for Americans recommend less than 10% of daily calories as added sugar, which will turn out to be about 12 teaspoons in a day. However, the American Heart Association has much stricter guidelines. They say less than 6 teaspoons of sugar for a woman and less than 9 teaspoons of sugar for a male. Now, we do use sugar, and we use sugar long term. It's not like we haven't used sugar. I use sugar since birth.
Same with me.
So are you. Do you have any side effects of sugar use?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you have inflammation, cardiovascular disease, obesity, or cancer?
No.
No. So how many cubes of sugar do we use in a day? Probably not more than 4 for both of us. I might even use 2. He might be using 4 or 5, depending on the day.
Probably for me it'll be like 6, 7 teaspoons of sugar a day.
Yeah, even if you eat out,
With
pick
the
out
jam.
on chocolate. Even if you
Well, then it may be a little more.
Yeah, but we are very well within the guidelines, and it seems like, yeah, the guidelines might be working because it doesn't seem like we have any side effects from it.
So the final point about sugar is toxicity. What does it really mean? How toxic is sugar?
Well, I haven't died of sugar yet, so I thought I better check what it actually means. All the sources that were using toxic were coming back to the same thing: inflammation, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and rheumatoid arthritis. So that's what's meant by toxicity. The concept of toxicity was, I believe, was introduced by Lustig and Liz study when he had a 9-day study on African and Latino children that were obese and had either high blood pressure or high triglycerides, and they self-reported what they ate. So he chose kids that 28% of calories were eating from sugar. So what he did, instead of glucose, fructose, which is sugar, he put them on glucose, which is starch. After 9 days, he tested the parameters like the weight, the hunger, triglycerides, blood pressure, and they all improved. So he concluded sugar must be toxic. The problem is that I think that he tested fructose effect on obese, insulin-resistant kids that loved cookies. Now, if you, instead of cookies that are made of sugar, give a bagel that is not made of sugar, of course the hunger is going to disappear, because who wants to eat unsweetened cookies? I wouldn't. So I think the study was poorly made, but the word toxicity somehow stuck to sugar, and it causes incredible damage to us. A lot of us suddenly panic about sugar, and instead of sugar, let's not touch sugar, let's not put the 2 cubes of sugar into the coffee, let's do something else, sugar substitutes. Now it turns out after so many years that sugar substitutes are worse than sugar. So are we doing ourselves any favor with this? Sugar toxicity. Can sugar actually kill you? Yes, it can. So there's something called LD50. LD50 is lethal dose with a 50% of chance of killing you. It's a medical terminology. How much sugar do you need to eat to have this 50% of chance of dropping dead? Guess. Is it 2 teaspoons, 3 teaspoons, 1 Coke, 5 cakes? It actually turns out to be 5.4 pounds. Just like that, all at once. So try to eat 5.4 pounds of sugar, and then you have a 50% of chance of...
That's a full 2.5 bags of the paper bags of sugar. I don't know who could even get that down at once.
Yeah, but you see, everybody blames the sugar. It's so toxic. Is it really toxic? Because water can kill you too. How much water to kill you? 6 liters. So it's not far off from sugar. But what about alcohol? It turns out to be 0.6 liters of alcohol, and you're 50% dead.
Chance of death.
Yes.
Which is a lot easier to do than that sugar.
For sure. You can drink half a liter of alcohol with ease, but try to eat 2 bags of sugar. It's just gross. So let's not exaggerate. So the conclusion is the side effects of sugar are dose dependent. So you need to know your limit, and you have to be responsible. There is a difference between sugar use and sugar abuse. Let's define sugar abuse: over 6, 9, 10 teaspoons in a day. Above that, forget it. You're abusing sugar. So know your stuff, know what you're doing. And if a problem is for you that you're eating out frequently, maybe the key is not to avoid sugar and use something else that is sugar mimicking, but maybe to learn how to cook. Last year, I wrote a cookbook for people who want to know how to eat and how to use sugar responsibly. The cookbook that I wrote is called 69 Pleasures, because I like eating well and I like eating healthy. Give it a try. Maybe your sugar addiction is not that bad after all. You just simply don't know how to cook well.
So that's our 3 cents to the topic.
Yeah,
or maybe our 6 to 9 teaspoons.
6 to 9 teaspoons. Yes, that's right. Yeah, with the 69
69
pleasures. Okay, until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.